Alright, so I'm going to break this video up into 3 sections. We'll be going over setting up pinion angle, adjusting the Panhard rod, and then setting up the vehicle's wheelbase. The only other thing I want to mention before we hop into the video is that the comment to get the most likes on this video over a period of a week will get the exclusive UMI decal pack. Stickers that I got left over from the install here, but comment with the most likes over the next week. I will send it out to you. No matter what it is, good luck, and whoever wins it, I'll get it shipped out real quick. So we'll be doing this in 3 parts, and you need to think of this in 3 portions when you're setting up your car's adjustable suspension. If you have lowered your car, or if you have some adjustable suspension, or whatever the case may be, if you need to recenter the axle in your car, you need to think about it in 3 ways. When you lower the car, you've altered the vehicle's wheelbase. You've also adjusted where the axle is situated from the driver's side to the passenger side in relation to the chassis, and you've also changed the pinion angle, which is the angle that the pinion of the differential is up or down relative to the front of the car. So you can picture it that way. The first thing we're going to go over is setting up the pinion angle, because in my case, this is the first thing that I was going to end up doing. Once we get that out of the way, we will hop into the Panhard bar, and then finally wrap up with the lower control arm adjustment. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is setting up the pinion angle. Now, this is a term that's thrown around quite a bit, and if you actually want to see a really good video specifically on this, check out BMR Suspension's YouTube channel. We've got about a 5-minute video going over this and what it all means and what some of the settings are you guys should pay attention to depending on the type of driving and suspension that you have is. So definitely check out BMR's video on it. It's going to be more in depth than I'm going to go, but the point of setting your pinion angle up is to prevent driveline vibration and driveline wear. So you're talking about the working angle of your drive shaft in relation to the engine and transmission. So the car can be at any angle. It can be a little lopsided. Ideally, you'll try and get it as close to level as you can, because I believe there's a built-in 3 or 4 degree driveline angle in F-bodies, which means that the driveline slopes downward from the harmonic balancer to the tail shaft. But there's 2 places you can measure this from. You can measure it, which is the easiest in BMR's video, from the face of the harmonic balancer or from the output shaft of the transmission. There's a straight line between the 2, and they're going to give you your reference points. So I'm going to hop into the car, check what kind of angle I'm showing on my magnetic angle finder, and we will use that as our reference number. We want a -2 degree driveline angle, which means whatever the front number is, we want the rear number to be 2 degrees less than it. So it could be 30, that should be 28. If it's 5, that should be 3. If it's 0, it should be -2. So the angle doesn't matter. It's all relative to how your car is sitting. I've loaded the suspension front and back, so as you can see, the wheels are cribbed in the front. The rear is on jack stands right now. So let's hop under the car and see what our working angle is of the engine. So we're under the front of the car now, and you can see the harmonic balancer is going to be our reference point. So I'm going to call that +3. So when we move to the back of the car, we should have 2 degrees less angle, which means we should have a +1. So until recently, I've seen it explained way more complicatedly than this actually should be. I mean, prior to this, even in the video installing the torque arm and adjusting it, I'd actually adjusted it wrong. It was way off. Luckily, I didn't have any vibrations or problems that stemmed from it, but I used an older video that was on BMR's website that recommended going off of the drive shaft. So you're actually measuring drive shaft angle, not pinion angle. They're not the same thing, but those words are interchanged a lot. So +3 in the front. Hopefully we're going to have +1 in the back. All right, so there it is mounted on the torque arm's tail shaft, I guess you could call it. It's the rearmost plate that's mounted to the torque arm or welded to it, and the angle's not going to be great for you, but what I do see is a +1. So we are right in the money right now. So what we basically did was show you how to check the pinion angle. Now, if your rear adjustment is out a little bit, whether it's up or down relative to where it should be, after you measure it off the harmonic balancer, that's up to you to adjust it. And it'll be pretty obvious which way to move it. Once you start spinning your adjuster, you'll see if you're going the right way or the wrong way. So I hope that makes sense. I watched BMR's video a couple times and it sunk in finally. I did read some more threads on LS1 Tech, and there's still mixed information out there. So as far as I can tell, this is the best way to do it after reading what the general consensus is on how to measure the pinion angle. And I guess that's about all I got to say about it. It's pretty simple. I was guilty of overthinking it like many other people are, and it's something that I actually learned after finally fully setting up the rear suspension of the car for the last time, hopefully. Enough about that. Let's move on to adjusting the Panhard rod and get our axle centered from driver's side to passenger side. There's a couple of reasons that you'd want to check this, but especially if you're lowered, you're going to want to correct it because your car is going to sit a little bit funny if you have the stock Panhard rod. So let's hop into that. Alright guys, so we have the wheels off the car and we have the car up in the air. And this is very important that we do not have the rear end supported by the jack stands. Now, I've had some people ask, where do you typically put your jack stands under the car when it's up in the air like this? And for me, I actually put them on this car and the 3rd gen and whatever else, right on the bottom of the sway bar bushing clamshell mounts right here. Put one here and one over there. This time, I actually put them up in front of where the lower control arm bolts on the actual frame of the car, so I can let the rear end droop and the suspension's not loaded. That should allow us to be able to set up the new rear suspension without having the rear end fighting us. And when we're actually going to tighten this stuff down, we're going to want to put all the weight on the rear end, so we'll actually move our jack stands farther back here, and we'll go ahead and torque everything down to spec. The car came with these red UMI Performance dual Heim joint lower control arms, as well as a dual Heim joint Panhard rod. And it's good stuff, but as soon as I installed that 12-volt rear end in the car, the drivetrain noise just got to be a little bit much for me. So I'm going to try and quiet it down a little bit with that. That by installing the polyurethane side of the control arms and Panhard rod on the body side, it's going to absorb or dampen some of the vibration or gear whine you might be getting from the rear end. Now, it's not a sure thing, but it seems to be the general consensus that the parts I have now will be a little bit quieter than what's on there presently. So I will have to start by taking out the Panhard rod, and the rear end or the body might shift a little bit. Don't be worried about that, but don't be probably under the car when you're actually dropping things free. Just be safe about it. Go slow, take your time. I always do. So first things first, I'm going to take out this Panhard rod and hopefully get the rear end centered better than ever, and we'll go from there. So what you see here is a homemade plumb bob. What I have is a piece of string and a couple of nuts hanging from it to center it with gravity. Now, what we're going to do is measure from the axle hub to the string on each side. So I'm right at, I'll call it I'm right at 4 inches on this side. Quick note is that these are centered on the center line of the axle according to my eyeballs. Now, there's probably a more exact way to do this, but this is going to work really good for me and most people that are doing this. And what I'm showing on this side is like 3 3/4, so I'm about 1/4 inch out. Now, because moving one thing is going to affect the other, if I move the other side about 1/8 inch, it's going to move this side about 1/8 inch, and that's going to give me my 1/4 inch difference. So what I need to actually do is split that difference, and I'm going to end up with like 3 7/8 on this side and maybe 3 7/8 on the other side, and hopefully I'll be nice and centered. Visually, the rear end does not stick out that far on this side, and it doesn't really poke in much on that side. So what I'm seeing right now is reflecting what is in reality when the car's on the ground with the tires on it. So I don't think I'm gonna have to move it much. I'll probably give it quite a few turns, and I might have to wrestle the axle a little bit because right now it's resting in its current position, but not a big deal. I'll set the rear end down again, put a few turns on it, and hopefully we'll be pretty dialed in. so everything is settled down on the suspension. I'm gonna be careful not to bump these, but hopefully you'll be able to see kind of what I'm looking at here. All right, let's call the driver's side a healthy 3 3/4. Actually had to do one more adjustment off camera. It did it 6 turns out, and that was too many. On this side, trying to do this without bumping it here. On this side, we also have a fat 3 3/4 inches out from the axle hub. So right now, this rear axle should be centered, and hopefully when we put the wheels on and everything's all settled down, we're going to be able to have a perfect wheel fitment inside of it while it's parked. Now, obviously there's going to be another couple hundred pounds when I go sit in the driver's side, so that might change things a little bit while you're driving. I mean, maybe you could do it on the ground and then pick it up, sit in it, take a measurement somehow. I don't know how you do it. It'd be kind of tricky. You'd almost have to put some ballast in the driver's side seat for a little while or whatever, but for 99.9% of us, this is a really good way to do it. So now that's done, the suspension's loaded. I'm gonna put a little bit of blue thread locker on the driver's side bolt now. I already put some on the passenger side, and I'll torque both of these to 72 pound-feet. It's important you do all that stuff with the suspension loaded, and we'll move on to the lower control arm installation. Alright, so I got the car on the ground, pretty much done with the installation of these parts, and it looks to me like the wheel alignment from left to right on each side is much better. So I'll try and give you as honest of a view as I can. I'll move it around just a little bit, see how your eye catches it. It does poke out just a little bit. And on this side we have right about the same. So as you'll see, wheel pokes out just a little bit right where it starts to come off the top of the tread, kind of rolls out of the wheel well. Now if I drive it a little bit, it's going to settle a little bit, and I don't think it's going to change all that much because I did all this with the suspension loaded as it said you should. Alright guys, so what you see here is my fairly rudimentary setup for measuring that the rear axle is straight inside the rear axle housing relative to the front wheels. Now I'm going to be checking two things here. I've got these two jack stands set up with carpenter string running from the front of the car to the back of the car. It's tied off to that lawnmower behind the car, and it's ran across the center line of each wheel hub. So from the front wheel hub, it continues down, and it might not look like it with this angle, but it is on the center line of the rear axle hub. So what this is going to do is enable you to see if your rear axle is straight relative to the front wheels. Now, I think this car has a little bit of toe out, and it also has staggered wheels, which is going to make this probably not as accurate as I'd like. But right here is why I think there's a little bit of toe out in the alignment. If you can see, there's a little gap right there. You can actually see daylight through it. It's maybe 1/8 of an inch, but it's the same on the other side of the car. So if I try and compensate for that by turning left or turning right, it's actually not going to get better. It's going to fix one side and make the other side worse. So what you wanted to do was align the wheel by turning it so you touch the string. Now watch what happens when I touch the string. See, now I'm touching it, and it should be rubbing it. Looks good. The back of the car looks good too. But if I go to the other side of the car, that 1/8 inch gap is maybe wider now. It's closer to even 1/4 inch if I had to guess. So I'm going to put this back to a happy medium between the two, left and right, relative to the car. And I'm going to disregard that as telling me if the axle is straight. We're going to do this another way. So you might ask yourself, how am I going to do this if I can't use this carpenter's string like I was really hoping to? Because in my case, it's just not going to happen. Probably can't really tell. I can't get the camera close enough, but it's not touching. That's my point. And instead of measuring from the front hub, or trying to guess where the center is, I'm actually going to put it on where the center line is and hook it on the inside of the wheel lip, because that's a known point. And then I can hook it on this side of this wheel lip. And that should give me my axle center line. Now, the factory wheelbase of these cars is 101.1 inches. So ideally, from there to there, being these are both 18-inch diameter wheels, I'm going to have 101.1. So this is obviously something that I'm not going to be able to do by myself, even if I try and hook it on the front of that wheel. So I'm going to get a little help, and I'm going to have somebody hang on to the dumb end of the tape measure, and I'm going to see what I got over here. So let's grab a tape measure and see what happens. Looks like it's just under 101. So the factory spec is 101.1, so it's about 1/8 inch off, and that means I have to take both of these rear lower control arms and adjust them out so I can achieve 101.1. So we're going to go to like 1/8 inch to the inside of this bead. It's actually a little ways off. It's more like at 107/8. And I'll get a little bit more out of it. That'll actually give me some more room for clearance in front of the tire. So I need to adjust this out a little bit, and we should be pretty good there, but I'll check the other side and see if it's going to be the same. I'm hoping it is, and I guess I'll let you guys know. Alright, so now we know that the rear axle is actually closer to the front of the car than it should be, or is actually a shorter wheelbase than it would be from the factory. Now, if I do move the axle back, it's actually going to give me a little bit more room in front of that tire on the inside where I said I could basically fit my finger. It might get close to doing 1.5 fingers or whatever. It might be another 1/8 inch, so this is a good thing. Another good thing is that just like I noticed last night when I installed those lower control arms, and what I'm seeing by measuring that kind of crude way, is that this end is actually the same length. It was just under 101. It was like 107/8 or something like that. It was identical. So if I do the same amount of turns on each side, I should be able to achieve 101.1 by going off of what is a known value. Now the known value on these is that every inch of thread rod has 16 turns in it. So if I turn this a known amount of times to achieve that, say 1/8 inch or whatever it is, I'm gonna know how many times to turn it, and I should be able to nail it pretty much on the first try. I got that info on the thread rod from UMI. They were nice enough to tell me what the thread pitch is of it, so it's actually gonna make this pretty easy and not really be much guessing. So I'm gonna do some quick math and figure out exactly how far I should adjust those out. I'll fight the rear end farther back. I'll probably have to wrestle it a little bit because it's gonna be pretty settled where it is. And then hopefully we're gonna have our 101.1 and we'll be good to go. So one quick thing to note is that being that this wheelbase is a little bit shorter, it might be preferential to people that are out road racing or autocrossing, because you have to imagine you racing a go-kart around a track or a limousine. A shorter wheelbase is generally going to turn quicker than a long wheelbase. So it might be actually hurting the car, bringing it out to what it should be, but the point of this is to show you guys how to center that rear axle and the wheel wells just perfect. So that's what we're going for, and hopefully when we're all done, we're going to have perfection back here. Alright, so if I calculated this right, I'm at 107/8 and I need to go to right between 101 and an eighth and 101 and a 16th. So I'm going to go closer to an eighth, and if my math is correct, that is 4 turns on each one of these adjusters. So if I go 4 full turns, that should be a quarter of an inch, or you know, if you want to really break it down, that's going to give me the fraction that I need. So I believe it's full turns. I'm gonna go 4 full turns on both sides, put the suspension back up loaded with the jack, put the wheel back on, measure it, and see what I got. So hopefully we can do this quick and dirty up in the air. It shouldn't take too much work, unless my little helper wants to come give me a hand. But otherwise, that's about all I gotta do as far as I can tell, and hopefully it's gonna go pretty quick. So I'm all done adjusting and the car is settled, and what I've got is, I suppose I should go on the center line, between a 16th and an eighth. So this is perfect. It's 101, I'd call it 101.1. I'll check the other side, but I think that was the perfect amount of turns. Alright guys, so there you have it. There is how to actually adjust and reset the wheelbase of your car. I couldn't find real specific info on 82 to 92 third gens or the LT1 cars, but it should be identical if I had to guess. So I can speak to it being an LS1 car, 98 to 02. It's 101.1 inches, and we were able to achieve that after we figured out a couple of known values and we knew kind of how to do it. So can't thank UMI's tech support enough. The guy that I talked to on the phone explained it very clearly to me how to do it, and he didn't talk to me like I was a moron or anything like that. It was nice, and he actually gave me a lot more info about the circle track racing program that they have and how much stuff that a lot of the people there deal with this on a regular basis. So this is just scratching the surface on setting up a chassis. If anything, all we're really doing is setting it up to be the same setup as it would have came from the factory or within the ballpark of it. After watching this video, you should be able to figure out how to set up your pinion angle, how to set your wheelbase, and how to adjust your Panhard bar to realign your axle left to right on your car. So hopefully this has been a good informative video for you. There's always something to learn about these cars, and this is just one more thing in a long list of things I still want to sort out on the car. All this is going to be applicable to the IROC Z as well, so this knowledge is translatable to this car and other cars. The idea and principles are the same. So now that that's all set up, the car should be good to go. Unfortunately, it actually just snowed out yesterday, so there's quite a bit of snow, and they just salted the road, so no, I will not be driving the car right now. I'm gonna keep this one nice. If it was the IROC Z, I'd be out driving it, but it is not. I did get a little bit more room up here. I can feel it's just a little bit looser up in the front corner there, and I have plenty of clearance all the way around the wheel. And if I'm honest, the wheel is actually centered a little bit better in the car. It looks like it's perfect. I can't really tell if it's favoring one side or the other looking at it from any angle. So I'm gonna call that a win. Anyways, I hope you guys liked today's video. If you did and you learned something, definitely share with a buddy who needs to know how to set up their car, or if they're having problems after installing a new rear end or rear suspension components, or especially if they lowered their car and haven't done any of this. You should be able to sort out your car yourself with some very basic tools and a little know-how. But that's about all I got for today's video. If you're new to the channel, definitely hit that subscribe button and come back for more videos. And until next time, we'll see you guys in the next video.